Hey everybody, this is Blake here. I'm reviewing Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Now this is a movie that while I was watching it, I wasn't too impressed. I thought it was pretty uneven. But then the more I thought about it after I had seen it, the more I began to like it. It is a movie that is very flawed, but what it accomplished really did impress me. I'm trying to think the best way to really break this movie down, and I guess that's with acts. The first act, where they're pretty much setting everything up, I think that's the weakest act because it is very conventional and sort of generic. Throughout, like, the whole thing, you're seeing him as a kid. He's this, great kid, and then he witnesses his mother being killed by a vampire. So he grows up harboring a grudge against her killer. And once he discovers that the guy who killed her was a vampire, he becomes interested in vampire hunting and starts training under a mentor. And throughout the entire first act, I felt like I'd seen this movie before. It goes through all the cliches and all the conventions, all the way down to you can never get too close to anybody because you're just endangering them by association. And like 5 minutes later, he's already cavorting with Mary Elizabeth Winstead. I know she's hot, and I have a huge crush on her, but I was kind of forced. He's at first trying to ignore her, maybe act a little bit rude, but for some reason she's still attracted to him, and then he becomes attracted to her. It was very, it's your typical Hollywood romance, but this time I thought it was maybe a little bit more forced than usual. And that's my main problem, is when I see a movie called Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, I want to see originality in some way, but at this point I didn't really feel like they needed to have the whole Abraham Lincoln motif because it's just a typical generic vampire slayer movie. And so at first I was disappointed, but then at the same time the action scenes were very well done. The guy who directed this movie, he did Night Watch and Day Watch, which I was honestly lukewarm about, both of them. But I did really like Wanted. And one thing with this director is that he is one of the only directors who can pull off CGI perfectly in these types of action movies. Usually with CGI action films, especially when you're focusing on like characters fighting and not giant robots or monsters, usually I just don't like how that looks. But with this film, even when the action isn't seamless, it always seems worth it because he's about to deliver some really cool shot and or maybe a whole scene, and the CGI really works there. The director really knows how to use it very well, and there's a great use of slow motion. The 3D was pretty good, and he injects a few horror elements into these action sequences, which makes them pretty suspenseful and edgy. And even though the vampires, they're once again very CGI-ish, sort of like the Fright Night remake, they still look pretty creepy. Or not creepy, but you wouldn't want to screw with them. So they look pretty good. And the actors who play the vampires are very interesting too. I liked the main bad guy a lot. And I think he was the guy from Dark City. What has he even been doing lately? I don't think I've seen him in years. But so whenever there was an action scene, I was interested. But when it tried to step away and be a little bit more dramatic or romantic, I was getting bored. But then this all changed during the second half, which probably will make or break the movie for you. See, after a certain point, Abraham Lincoln realizes that to stop the vampires, he needs to abolish slavery, because the reason why people don't know about the vampires' existence, or at least the majority of the people don't know, is because for the most part the vampires are preying upon slaves because they're considered second-rate citizens and nobody's going to really notice when a few of them vanish. And so then that's when Abraham starts becoming more political. And then they start using like real life events like the Battle of Gettysburg, and but then they insert the vampires there, and that's when it really started embracing its daft concept, and that's what I wanted all along. Yes, there's pretty much no real action during this whole segment. It's all focusing on how the Civil War and the whole thing with the vampires is affecting Abraham, especially once his son is put in peril. And you really do feel that, yeah, he's becoming very tired and weak compared to how he used to be. That this whole thing is really weighing down on him, and it starts focusing more on his struggle as he's trying to keep things right, but the war isn't necessarily going in his favor, and you really feel that the country is being torn apart by it. And I cannot imagine the stress that he had to have gone through in reality. And I thought the movie did a good job at capturing that. And it's like, where's the action? Or where's even the horror? And it's just, at this point, like, it's like the movie suddenly became a biopic. And this, at first, really annoyed me because I wanted a more action-oriented film. But that's actually what I ultimately started to like. And I'll explain why in a little bit. But eventually, by the third act, they go back to, an action mode. And the action is very good. Once again, it's very digital. It's very CGI. But it's all very stylish. There's a lot of unique techniques used in these action scenes that I really like. For example, a character tries to stab a vampire. And I think they catch his wrist. So then what does he do? He drops the knife and catches it with his other hand and pierces him in the heart. There's a lot of really cool techniques like that are very well choreographed, even if there's a lot of CGI used. But the whole finale with the train is pretty exciting and pretty spectacular. Even when the visual effects don't quite work, I thought they looked cool, and I was totally into it. But I think what I really started to like about this movie is how sincere it is. When you think of the whole premise, the title, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, that's a little silly. So you're expecting it to be winking at the camera constantly. You expect tongues to be placed firmly against their cheeks. And you think that the whole thing's going to be treated as sort of a joke, but it's not. It's very solemn about it. It's very straight-faced. And that I find to be hilarious. Just thinking about how dead serious this movie is makes me laugh. And I'm not in a bad way either. I think that was the best way to go about it, because if it tried to be funny, it may have not as worked well. But when you tried to play such a stupid concept so seriously, that just makes it hilarious. So really, yeah, there was a lot of faults. There's a lot of inconsistencies or plot holes. For example, at one point, a vampire appears to be able to smell a person nearby, but then throughout the rest of the movie, the vampires apparently have lost this sense. And for some reason, just knowing about vampires makes you super strong. And I figure, okay, Abraham Lincoln has been training for quite some time. Maybe that's why. But then I can't think of his name, the guy who plays his friend, when you see him kind of struggling against the vampires, he seems to be doing pretty well too. And so that didn't really make a whole lot of sense. And what else? There was something else that was really bothering me, but I can't remember what it is now. Oh well. There's a lot of dumb moments like that, but for the most part, I think the film's really, its most glaring error is that it is very awkwardly paced. There is a lot of downtime, and usually with action movies, I don't want any kind of downtime whatsoever. But like, as I said, where the movie becomes its slowest is also, in a way, its most captivating, just because how seriously they take it. And they do a pretty good job with the drama, too. Even though I didn't like the love story at first, when you see them as a couple when they're older, they do really feel like a legitimate couple who has been with each other for quite a long time. And even though they kind of screw up with Abraham Lincoln's old man makeup, it's not quite as good as it wants to be, but it's not that bad either. I thought it was better than what I saw in Prometheus. They do a pretty good job with Mary Elizabeth Winstead and how she ages. And so that's, I guess, all I have to say. It has some spectacular action, good 3D, but it's also sort of dumb and has a lot of awkward pacing issues. But most of all, I just thought the fact that they really went all out with the whole Abraham Lincoln being a vampire hunter concept, and then they were completely serious about it. They treated it so seriously, and I thought that just made it funny. So really, I think if you don't like this movie, it's because you can't forgive the weird concept. You're going to think of Abraham Lincoln slaying vampires. That just sounds too stupid. If you really believe that, then you might not like this movie, and you also might think it's just too slow at times. But I do believe it's worth watching as a matinee. I enjoyed it a lot. It's pretty violent. It has good action. I guess I'm repeating myself now. But it was everything I really wanted it to be, just a flawed version of what I wanted it to be. And I was okay with that. I thought it was a pretty good movie. So that is all I really have to say. Go to my website where you could read my written review of this movie, where I go a little bit more in depth, I guess. And what else do I have to say? Oh yeah, follow me on Twitter. I revealed one of the subjects of Season 4 of Critiquing the Critics there. And hopefully within a day or 2 days from now probably, I'll have my Season 4 or Season 3 recap, and we can do the Season 4 race. It's really late if I sound like I'm slurring. So I'll see you guys later.